Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to Unity of Kern County on this 25th day of September 2022. I'm Reverend Chuck, and today we're going to continue looking at Jesus' statement to the people of loving your neighbor as yourself as we learn to deal with difficult people in our lives. And of course, the materials that I share with you each Sunday are based upon the spiritual principles and lessons as taught by Jesus and Unity of Worldwide Ministries, and of course, my 29 years as an ordained Unity minister. And of course, as we do each Sunday, we honor that presence of God as we best understand that presence in our life and in our affairs as we pray the Charles Fillmore prayer, in the presence. I am now in the presence of pure being, and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge your presence and power, O blessed Spirit. In your divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from your pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect law. And so it is. Well, as I shared last week, the author G.K. Chesterton summed up Jesus' instructions for us in today's world with this quote. The Bible tells us to love our neighbors and to also love our enemies, probably because they're generally the same people. Well, let's face it, we all have difficult people in our lives. We run into them in our jobs or relationships with others. And I'm sure Jesus had the same thing. In fact, we know that he did, as it's pointed out in the Synoptic Gospels. And loving your neighbor as yourself and doing unto others as you would have others do unto you. We're looking at that as we try to see why these difficult people keep showing up in our lives. Once we understand that sometimes we need to shift how we see things, okay? Our focus should be moving us from the sense of being a victim to these people to wondering why this keeps happening, though. So we need to ask the question, what can I learn from this situation, this circumstance, or the experience that can help me set healthy boundaries? Well, last week you probably remember me sharing a quote that was posted on Facebook by my friend Ray Wallace, which stated, when you replace why is this happening to me with what is this trying to teach me, everything shifts in our lives. And so the book, as I said last week, that I'm using is Dr. Mark Rosen's book, Thank You for Being Such a Pain, a spiritual guidance for dealing with difficult people. That quote from Ray really speaks volumes in light of what Dr. Rose teaches in his book. And as I shared last week in his introduction, he writes, Thank You for Being Such a Pain is about the difficulties we experience in everyday relationships and, of course, the deeper spiritual meanings that underlie those difficulties. And of course, he explains the 7 issues that we deal with, and they are, number 1, difficult people. There's no escaping them. Number 2, what makes someone difficult. Number 3, why do some people drive us crazy? Number 4, ways of seeing others. Number 5, why do relationships have difficulties? Number 6, everyone is difficult to somebody. And finally, the spiritual perspective about all this. Well, you'll remember last week I shared issues number 1 and number 2, difficult people, there's no escaping them, and what makes someone difficult. So this week in part 2, let's look at issues 3 through 7. Number 3, why do some people drive us crazy? Who we find difficult and who doesn't bother us is different for each of us, and he gives an example. Sam and Sally. Sam hates people who talk during a movie. whereas Sally loves it and doesn't enjoy a movie unless someone is making colorful remarks about the movie and its characters. You see, people are not difficult because of what they do. They are difficult because of how they elicit an experience of unpleasant emotions in us as a result of their behavior. So, where's the key for this? Well, the key in this issue is to know that it is just as important for dealing with difficult people is to pay attention what is going on inside of ourselves, not just the difficult that person brings to us. This takes us to number 4, how we see others. We like to think that we see the world clearly. After all, who of us have not been exposed to a behavior of someone close to us that says, I know what's right, and you're not doing it, therefore you're wrong, and being difficult. It's amazing how many people, though, believe that their view of reality is an accurate one. Run into anybody lately? In actuality, there are several truths, though. There is that truth, that the truth of the person with whom we're having the difficulties with. Then there's that truth of any witness or bystander observing the situation. We all have our truths, and they all come from different perspectives. So when we view our difficulties, our interpretations are based on how we feel at any moment. If we're tired or angry or suspicious, we will experience an interaction, if you will, with a difficult person differently than if we were feeling good. You see, we filter each encounter through our history, our life experiences, our hurts, our pain, our mistakes. So the key here is to know when we're dealing with a difficult person that it's important that we be open to a new way of viewing that situation. After all, if our current perception and assumptions about the difficulties are entirely accurate, we would have solved our problems with that individual by now. Number 5, why do relationships have difficulties? Well, there are many reasons, Dr. Rosen writes. It arises in every situation with relationships, but the most important one and difficult ones that stand out is this: insensitivity, inadequate communications, and of course, indifference. The key, he writes, is our relationships require that we work on developing sensitivity, communication skills, and caring skills. If we can do those 3 things, then we're on our way to healing whatever needs to be healed. And of course, number 6, everyone is difficult to someone. I know I've been called difficult at times in my life, and I've called other people difficult. And again, it's all based upon our own inner work that needs to be done. So if we're honest with ourselves, we will admit that at some time or another, we've done something to drive somebody crazy. Yet no matter how annoying we are to others, we don't willingly accept being labeled, though, as difficult. When we do something to annoy someone else, we're not being difficult, but we justify it. And we'll make statements like these: I had a bad day. I didn't mean it. I didn't do anything. Well, you deserved it. And the daddy of them all, you made me do it. You made me do it. Wow. What's going on here, though? It is the ego's perception of preserving its self-image. And it's part of the human condition. We all do it. See, it's a lot easier for us to focus on another's behavior than it is to admit that we're the one being difficult. See, we don't like being called out to admit that what we do, our behavior affects others. And that we don't like to be identified with that behavior, because then we find ourselves being condemned, and nobody wants to be condemned. We'd rather pretend that we are better than the person causing the pain for us. This gets played out time and time again in many relationships. So the key here is that in order to start the healing process, we must come to understand that difficult people aren't really that different from us. In fact, they are us. As we go back to that first statement made by Galveston, and that the enemy and our neighbor are pretty much the same. Number 7 brings us to that spiritual perspective. Isaac Singer once wrote, "There is a plan to the universe. There is high intelligence, even a purpose, but it's given to us on an installment plan. We are not here on earth just to have fun." Of course, remember Jesus' statement, in this life you're going to have trials and tribulations, but be of good cheer. We are here to develop a spiritual life. Our talents, our characters, our skills, our attributes, everything that we have is here to help us heal our souls and to contribute, if you will, to the world as a whole through our unique and divine essence towards the greater good. No one else can do what we are here to do. The catch is that we're here to learn too. And it's likely that we can't learn if we don't allow ourselves to ask the questions. Because if we don't, we end up getting that divine kick in our spiritual butt. The great spiritual traditions all teach that we live a meaningful, purposeful, and loving universe. The key to this aspect, of course, is to consider the possibility that difficult people are in our lives to help us grow spiritually. Therefore, our task is not to focus on the person causing the problem, but to look within and find out what is going on with ourselves, and to understand why we're having these problems and what we are here to learn as part of our spiritual journey. After all, difficult people help us to reveal what needs to be revealed so that we may heal what needs to be healed. And in that healing, it sometimes means that we must move on and away from very difficult people. Well, friends, if you ever have any questions about what I share with you, please contact me, Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or my email at revchuckunity@yahoo.com. I also want to thank you for following me on YouTube at Unity of Kern County, as well as the Facebook page, Unity of Kern County. And thank you all for your spiritual and financial gifts that keep the ministry going so that I can bring these messages to you on a weekly basis. So until next week, remember, friends, be good to yourself and others. God bless.